Welcome to another episode of Ready and Resilient Now Together, where we connect the world's top experts with families just like yours. I'm your host, Lucy Howell, joined by Dr. Robert Gillio, co-founder and chief medical officer of the Force for Health Network, and our partner on this mission, Don Donahue, president of WADEM, which stands for the World Association of Disaster and Emergency Medicine. We're here to turn cutting-edge knowledge into real-world action. Every episode brings you trusted guidance from frontline leaders, practical steps that you can use immediately, and an opportunity to have your voice heard. So feel free to comment and join the conversation. You can engage now on YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn. And if we feature your comment, you'll win a free ambassador membership at the Force for Health Network. All the tools we discuss are waiting in our free Force for Health Academy app, your one-stop shop for preparedness resources. Because when we prepare, together we grow stronger. Together. This is Ready and Resilient Now. Together. Let's begin. Well, hello, everybody. It is Tuesday, October 21st already. Lord, my name is Lucy Howell. I am coming to you live from Tucson, Arizona. My partner in crime, Dr. Rob Gillio, is out and about with family, so blessings to him. And we will be hearing from him a little bit later with a special video. And then I'm joined with our strategic partner, Dr. Don Donahue, who is the president of WADEM, which stands for the Worldwide Association of Disaster and Emergency Medicine. This show is this is our third episode. We started with Dr. Richard Carmona with our first episode, and then we were visited with Dr. Evangeline Franklin, who was frontline with Hurricane Katrina. And then we've got a special guest coming up in our segment, Dr. Rajeev Fernando, and we are excited to meet with him. He is the co-chair of the Infectious Disease Specialist Interest Group for WADEM. But before we get started, Don, we were talking about the tone of today's show. And as a mom, I am not a medical expert. I play the role of Main Street Mama, just trying to figure out what we can do to protect our families. And it is the season. 'Tis the season, right? Going back to school. And I mean, is COVID even still a thing? I know that I got a little, raspy and some inflammation. I had to get an inhaler, cold, flu. So I hand it to you. What's going on in your head as we lean into all of these holiday gatherings and back to school and, the season of risk, I'll call it.
Yeah, well, allow me to, as as the groundskeeping people went right by my window now, hopefully you're not hearing that. But
no, it looks good. Sounds great.
Good. Permit me to wax a little philosophic. 'Tis the season. It's autumn. Autumn is the season of many colors, not just the turning of the leaves, but the return of football, basketball, hockey, seasons within the season. We have Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and countless other celebrations that are coming up. Truly, these months reflect the theme of today's episode, 'Tis the season. But 'tis the season that represents many things to many people. October also represents the start of multiple other seasons, return to school season, election season, but more ominously, flu season, RSV season, COVID season. The seasons to celebrate and there's seasons to be wary. And to your question, yes, COVID is still out there. RSV is still out there. The flu is still out there, and some other bug that I can't. I don't know what it is. It's none of those three, but both my wife and I had it on separate occasions, and it's persistent and quite annoying with coughing and nasal drip. So it's a time to be aware and be ready.
Yeah, and it's also National Healthy Lung Month, which is interesting that National Healthy Lung Month seems to correlate with all these things that actually affect our lungs, right? And so I figured it would be a perfect time to kick off the conversation of these infectious diseases that affect our lungs with the little Viva video from our Force for Health Academy to kind of help set the stage. And then we can go ahead and turn towards our special guests and be able to actually talk about real life tools and prevention strategies to prevent the spread. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up to stage, what we call a Viva video. I'm going to make this full screen for us. And then we're just going to go ahead and play this.
Every cell in your body needs oxygen to survive. Here you can see red blood cells giving oxygen to a cell to keep it healthy. Red blood cells get the oxygen from your lungs, so it is very important to keep your lungs healthy. When you breathe in, oxygen travels down tubes called bronchi and then into small sacs called alveoli. These sacs have thin walls so that the oxygen can easily pass into the red blood cells. In someone with asthma, the airways become inflamed and narrow, making it difficult to breathe. This can happen when the airways are exposed to something they are sensitive to, a trigger that irritates the walls of the airways, causing them to tighten and swell. Your airways then produce extra mucus that blocks them even more. This is called an asthma attack. During an asthma attack, it is hard to get air into your body. You may wheeze, cough, have chest tightness, and trouble breathing. Because there is less air coming into the lungs, there is less oxygen for the red blood cells to carry to other cells around the body. In a very bad asthma attack, the airways can close so much that your cells and organs do not get enough oxygen to function. Asthma cannot be cured, but it can be controlled by avoiding triggers that irritate your airways, and by taking medication to reduce the inflammation and tightening of the airways.
So that was just an interesting foundation. Sometimes I think it's fascinating to actually look at the science of health. And even if it's through animated videos like that, just to get a sense on wow, inflammation or, reaction to things. I know I get reactions to dust. I don't think of myself as an asthma person, right? But I guess if I've got an inflammation and something's going on, my ability for my lungs to bring oxygen in and out, then I am in what might be an asthmatic state. I don't know. Like I said, I'm not the medical expert here. I think I don't know if you have any comments on that video, or if we want to go ahead and go right into your, chair of infectious disease to talk about these interesting things.
Just one brief comment, and then I'd love to introduce Dr. Santiago. It's my opinion, my experience that as we talk about asthma, sort of, it's just asthma. And it's not just asthma. My younger son had childhood asthma. And eventually, we not only need to have an inhaler, but if we traveled anywhere, we had a nebulizer. And I actually bought a generator to make sure that if there was no electricity, we'd still be able to treat him if we needed to. In a former life, I was an emergency department administrator in New York City, and I can tell you, asthma is very serious. It's not just something we get; it's truly life-threatening. So, monitoring that, staying on top of that. If you have it, treating it consistently, or if you think you may have it, getting examined and identifying whether you're suffering from seasonal allergies or life-threatening asthma is an important determination. So with that said,
and you know what, let me just add,
sure.
Until you are in that state of fighting for breath or thinking about fighting for breath, you won't get it. Right. And some folks may have felt that from COVID. And, that's something that I have felt, and it scares I'm just going to say hell out of me. Right.
Absolutely.
And so it is. So anyways, with that segue, I want you to go ahead and introduce your buddy, your friend, your colleague.
Wonderful. Yeah. And it truly is frightening, but let's just segue. It gives me absolutely great pleasure to introduce this month's invited guest. He's a great friend and colleague, as Rob and Lucy has said. Dr. Rajeev Santiago. Dr. Santiago is a U.S. physician with specialties in infectious disease, emergency medicine, and disaster medicine. He's co-chair, as was said in the introduction, of WADEM's Infectious Disease Special Interest Group, and he's a graduate of the Harvard Medical Faculty Physicians Fellowship in Disaster Medicine. Rajeev also brings a unique activity to our focus. He has his own line of high fashion, haute couture, that has been featured during Fashion Week in New York, Los Angeles, Paris, and Milan, among other places. The proceeds from Rajeev Fernando Fashion support a clinic in Kyiv, Ukraine, and healthcare delivery in some of the neediest places on earth via a nonprofit, non-governmental organization, Heal Corp. If connected with that, Dr. Rajeev recently, I think 2 days ago, returned from Ethiopia, where he was helping set up treatment for women who had been assaulted in conflict and in society. And then 2 weeks ago, Rajeev had the distinct pleasure and honor of being recognized with a humanitarian award given by the Miss Universe organization at a fashion show at the Eiffel Tower in Paris. So with no further ado, let's welcome Dr. Rajeev Fernando.
Sorry about that. Let's get him to the stage.
There he is.
Hello, everyone.
Dr. Rajeev, it is such an honor. I know that you literally got off the plane early last night or early Sunday morning, right? To be here with us. So thank you for joining us. I'm excited to have this dialogue with you again. I'm just the mama, and what we're trying to do is connect world-class experts directly to the kitchen table and the mom.
It is such an honor to be here, and quite frankly, I don't deserve that kind of introduction, but extremely flattering and extremely humbled to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we want to save the end to talk about when I say fun stuff, I mean your philanthropic work. To me, you are a true force for health hero with what you do with your life. But let's kind of stay on the topic of infectious disease, and it is the season, right? COVID and RSV and flu. So as the chair, of WADEM for infectious disease, and this is your expertise, what's on your top of mind right now within the season, and what type of advice would you give to families right now?
Well, Lucy, you're right on top of things. Right now, as both of you introduced the show, it's pneumonia season. There are numerous pathogens that can cause it: bacteria, viruses. We often think of viruses as important because you can actually prevent severe disease by a simple concept of vaccination. Throughout this podcast or webinar, you will hear the simple concept that I mentioned, which is vaccination saves lives. It's quite simple, quite straightforward. But over the past few months, especially, we've had a lot of hesitation, change of governments, which has unfortunately influenced people getting vaccinations. That is very troubling as we head into this season.
So I'm curious. We're sitting around the family dinner table, and how do you suggest we navigate that conversation when your family member is, what are you talking about? I'm not doing that. I'm just curious. Like, we need some help as to navigating that type of conversation, right?
Yeah, that's a great question you pose. And I'll be very honest with you. Let's start with influenza since the season is approaching. I'll be very honest with you. The efficacy of the vaccine in preventing the flu itself, mild to moderate disease, is very low. And we hear this all the time where people say, well, I got vaccinated, still I got flu. Why do I need to do it again? And the answer to that is really by getting a vaccine. Vaccines save lives. I'm sorry to repeat that so quickly into the show. But by getting a vaccine, this prevents severe disease, which is hospitalization, being placed on a ventilator, and of course, death. So that is what these vaccines actually do. Beyond that, you mentioned if someone has, the actual influenza, mild to moderate case, basic respiratory etiquette is important. Being considerate to other people is very important. Influenza, of course, has the advantage of actually having great treatment. We have a drug called oseltamivir, which is Tamiflu, which remarkably has not developed resistance in years. Stay tuned for that in the future. But there is appropriate medication. Now, as we enter the season, what I always like to look at is how we are in the northern hemisphere. But in order to predict severity of the season, what I usually look at is how things were in the southern hemisphere. So Australia is the place that I often focus on, and often the severity of disease in Australia kind of predicts what will happen in the northern hemisphere where we are. Saddened to say that Australia had a very severe flu season. It started earlier than anticipated, and they had a very severe season. So in general, the northern hemisphere follows that. That has been very concerned. The vaccination rate in the United States is less than 50%. And I'm anticipating a severe season. So the questions you posed are very important on how to prevent, of course, basic respiratory etiquette, things like that. But the number one way of preventing disease is vaccination.
So, Don, I know you had prepared some questions, but I'm like chomping at the bit. So please, if you've got some questions,
So,
jump in here.
yeah, absolutely. And I would suggest that part of the conversation is understanding the mechanism. Understanding we to the average person on the street. Okay, I hear commercials on television. It's flu season. Why is flu season in October or November? What changes in the world in our world that makes us susceptible to these respiratory diseases at this point in the year?
Great question. And certainly, it's cold weather has to be number one of the top reasons we see these viruses. Different viruses thrive in different environments. So when we had COVID first in 2020, we thought it was a respiratory virus that was only it happened in January, February, and many experts actually thought it'll fade away by the time we reach spring and the summer, but that was not the case. So we are frequently learning about these viruses. COVID, of course, is endemic, and you get it all throughout the year. But influenza and RSV are other viruses that predominantly peak in the wintertime. Definitely, climate has is influencing these two viruses. And like you pointed out a little while ago, these are two of we test most commonly for these three viruses: RSV, influenza, and COVID. There are numerous viruses that cause this clinical syndrome that both of you discussed before: a little fevers, a little nasal stuffiness, not feeling great. And thousands of viruses exist. As a matter of fact, in the infectious disease world, when we suspect a case of respiratory viral illness, we send the typical workup for the basic pathogens, probably about 10 viruses. And if that comes back negative, the patient often asks me and says, "Well, doc, what do I have?" And the answer we abbreviate called SSV, which is some sort of virus. It doesn't have a name, but it's circulating out there, and you do have a respiratory virus. So definitely the weather is one of the culprits, and with changing climate change around the world, these viral patterns have become more and more unpredictable. Of course, we're seeing different parts of the world with earlier onset of illness and things of that. So there's a lot unknown, but we do have a great panel of experts out there. Let me also add that the changing situation by our health secretary, firing so many different people, the advisory panel, conflicting recommendations from the FDA and CDC is another reason why people, the American population and around the world, quite frankly, um, actually increase vaccine hesitancy, and this is a big problem. Vaccines are made to sound like they're unsafe. There are various compounds added into these vaccines, which make it unsafe. Most recently, we were talking about hearing about how aluminium is an unsafe part of a vaccine, which causes depression, central nervous system disease, things of that. However, this is very untrue. Aluminium is safe, and the reason aluminium is in these vaccines is what we call an adjuvant. An adjuvant is something that enhances the performance of the vaccine, and that is why aluminium is actually in vaccines. However, certain politicians politicizing these vaccines have used it to their advantage. And also, we see different parts of the country higher vaccination rates, lower vaccination rates, completely based on a political situation, and that's why this is becoming extremely. It's becoming very trouble for infectious disease experts around the country and the world, really.
So I'm so happy to play just again the non-medical, eager to learn. So I'm happy to throw out the questions that people might be afraid to ask, right? So generally speaking, is there a difference between the common cold and the flu? Like when do you know when you need a medication to help it versus just some good old chicken soup?
That's a great question. And really, it's severity of the illness. When you get the common cold, symptoms tend to be milder. You will feel it when you need to see the doctor. It's probably an influenza or COVID or RSV. You will feel it. There are numerous viruses out there where we label as the common cold, like you nicely pointed out. But severity of illness is really what points you in that direction to go to your outpatient physician and get tested. So you will feel it. Uh, it's something that we also monitor, need to monitor. Let's say on day one, it's sometimes you can distinguish between an influenza virus or your common cold, but as the day by day two, day three, you will feel it. And all my patients tell me the same thing, that they felt different. And so, severity of illness, you will feel it as a patient, which will prompt you to go to your outpatient physician.
So it really is severity of illness. It's not like, oh, I have the cold, I'm not infectious,
Well,
right?
anyone who has a viral infection, we have something called droplets. They're spread by droplets. And to break this down, if you're within 6 feet of someone who's infected, you're prone to getting an infection. So when someone sneezes out, these particles are able to travel up to 6 feet. Now, this 6 feet varies for different viruses. Certain viruses, it can be longer or shorter, but a safe rule to assume is whenever someone is sneezing, they have a viral infection, the person within a certain distance is certainly prone to getting these infections as well.
Interesting. And I have another question, unless you want to jump in there, Don.
Go ahead. I'll follow you.
Okay. So the concept of pneumonia, when you say the word pneumonia, it just sounds very scary. And so is pneumonia a condition that then comes out of perhaps the severity of an influenza? Or where do you draw the line between what's pneumonia versus I just have the flu? Or can the flu turn into pneumonia? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Great questions for our audience out there. And let me just illustrate that. So this is what we have here. This is our throat, and we call behind that anatomically an area called the pharynx. And this is in the back of our throat. When the viral infection is limited to the pharynx at this level, that's what's called an upper respiratory tract infection, which is the common cold. It's limited to this area, and you have fevers, nasal congestion, running nose, things of that, but it's limited here. Now, once you get short of breath, much more cough, much more difficulty breathing, then you wonder whether this respiratory disease, has progressed into the lungs, and that is what is called a pneumonic process or a pneumonia. So, very nicely said. It is really the anatomical location of this illness, and that's what really distinguishes. Of course, the infection above tends to be milder. Your recovery tends to be faster with conservative medications, with an antiviral, bed rest, lots of fluids. That is always the mainstay of therapy. Very simple, but once it's progressed down into the lungs, a much more severe illness and requires a different set of treatment options.
which does segue nicely into one of the questions I was going to pose. Uh, Antivirals, lots of fluids, sleep. Can you really, if you get the flu, if you get a serious case of the flu, can you treat it?
Of course, there are numerous options to treat. The ability to respond to certain treatment is based on one's immune system. So if you're elderly, we know this, elderly people mount a suboptimal immune response compared to someone younger. Or let's say you have a younger patient with cancer or blood cancer, leukemia, lymphoma. Once again, their immune system, their ability to fight off an infection is compromised. So these are some of the patients, or let's say someone with a pre-existing lung condition. People who are smokers, we call that COPD. Sometimes people with asthma, pre-existing. These patients have a blunted response because your lungs, your lower respiratory tract is already compromised. So that puts you in a different situation on how to respond. People with normal, competent immune systems respond very well to conservative therapy, like you mentioned, Dr. Donahue, fluids, bed rest, and antivirals as well. That's basically the way you can kind of predict. So doctors know that one of the first things I do when I see a patient who comes to the hospital, and I like to be very transparent with my patient, is the ability to predict response to this bundle that we just went through. And I tell my patient, based on these risk factors, I think you're going to be okay. We will treat you aggressively. You're going to be okay. However, if someone has a compromised immune system, and we all know this, it's important for physicians to be very transparent and guide them along the way, inform them every step how you're doing, how things are changing. But someone with compromised immune system may respond differently and they tend to get sicker.
So then you would agree it's safe to say that flu can be treated but not cured.
I think no, it can be cured. Of course, it can be cured. But some people tend to shed virus longer. So if you have a normal immune system, you're able to resolve your flu system earlier. But with a compromised immune system, some of the conditions I mentioned, you tend to have the viral infection a little bit longer. So you can cure this. Like I mentioned before, great medications, great antivirals for influenza, which we haven't seen any resistance, but stay tuned for that. But if the physician, if the patient presents early, the physician picks up the right diagnosis, they will do well based on their immune system.
So, oh, so
No,
we,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No,
Well, I have a question, and
Please.
this is for a lot of the moms out there. Of course, the dads too, but moms tend to just be so busy and they kind of suppress their need to take care of themselves, right? And so, and she will not mind that I mention this as a case, right? So my sister-in-law, who happens to be younger than me, it was October, November, and she got a little bit of a cold and a cough, and she did not take care of it because everyone was coming over for the season, right? And it got worse and worse and worse. And literally on Christmas Day, she had to go to the hospital because she wasn't feeling well. And it turned out that this infection had resulted in liquid around the heart. It actually affected and caused myocardiopathy.
Yeah, that's
My,
correct. You're right.
that scared the heck out of me that a flu or a cold, if left untreated, could actually go beyond the lungs and affect the heart. Is that like a rare instance, or is that something that could actually happen if you don't treat a long-term cough or infection like flu or influenza?
That's a great question, Lucy. And it's important to understand that this is what we call the flu syndrome. So we do know very well that flu affects the lung, but left untreated for a longer time, like your sister-in-law, well, we're in such a busy era right now. There's so many responsibilities. We don't want to miss work. I can't think of a single physician, even if we get ill. There are so many responsibilities at the hospital. I mean, we cannot imagine taking a day off. And just like, it is such a fast paced world. And what your sister in law did was just try to manage. And we see this very often where patients say, well, I'm okay. I'm not well, but I'm going to keep fighting these symptoms, and hope for the best. And you nicely pointed out fluid around the heart can be in different areas of the heart, a myocarditis or a pericarditis. And the phrase itis indicates inflammation. So yes, it can affect different parts of the body. It can infect the lungs. It can infect the heart. Certain other it predisposes you to certain other conditions as well in the body. So flu itself can cause what we call a multi-system involvement. And if the syndrome gets really sick, if the patient gets really sick, what happens is the bacteria in the environment see the human being and say, okay, this patient, it has a compromised immune system and are not doing well clinically. Let me join the party. And what happens then is a bacteria, what we call superimposed infection. So you have an existing viral infection, and the bacteria joins the party and makes the patient even more sick. So that's why it's important to, identify these symptoms early and go to your provider early. No, I completely understand your sister-in-law. That's the way the world is, but that's why it's important to try to recognize this syndrome and present. This poses a great example for our viewers.
And what was scary, my biggest takeaway lesson that I learned, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is that once the heart weakens because of this built up fluid around it, it doesn't bounce back. Like it kind of stays compromised. So am I
Of
correct
course,
in saying that?
you're absolutely right. And it really depends on the degree of severity. Sometimes you have heart tissue which is killed off, and you cannot recover. That is dead tissue. So it depends on the severity of the heart. May I politely and respectfully ask whether your sister-in-law was vaccinated, if that's okay?
I don't know. She is not an anti-vax, so I'm sure she was. And this was then it ended up in a heart transplant. She was on a heart transplant list for 5 years, and so I don't know if there were preconditioning, or I don't know. I just was like, "Holy cow! You had a cough and a flu, and they attributed that to the buildup of fluid, and that caused irreparable damage to our heart."
Yeah.
That was my
Yeah.
biggest takeaway. I said, I'm going to take that message and share it to all the busy moms out there,
Of
because
course, yeah, yeah.
that is not fixable, right?
No,
And
you're absolutely right.
this was also pre-COVID. This was kind of like earlier on the deal. In talking about vaccinations, I don't know, Don, if this is okay, I'd love to go ahead and transition to another topic du jour, which is measles. And measles, has been such and it's been around forever, and it was just kind of an adopted at birth vaccination. And I don't even know if you talk to somebody like a parent these days, if they even actually know what measles is. So I wanted to just kind of transition this part of the conversation with a little quick video that Dr. Rob has provided for us using our 360 Human Explorer tools, which is really great in trying to increase the literacy levels on some of these conditions. So I'm going to go ahead and let's see if we can get that teed up. And I will make this full screen, and I will bring it to the stage. And where are you? Sorry about that. Where? Sorry, I had thought this. Okay, so keep talking, you guys amongst yourselves as we transition here. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, as she transitions, I was going to say, so some of this sounds pretty scary, especially winding up on the heart unit. So, moms are going to be going to see their son play high school basketball and visit their family for Thanksgiving, or go to the supermarket or you go to the mall for shopping. So how talk real briefly, because I see Dr. Rob here, about how do I prevent or even minimize the risk for respiratory disease?
Yeah, I think we've touched on that. We can do it once more, but really, vaccination is the simple way to prevent this. The reason I asked Lucy was respectfully and politely, was your sister vaccinated? Vaccination tends to prevent these severe complications. Like I'd mentioned, the vaccine itself is only about 60% or 65% efficacy in actually preventing the entire flu syndrome. But it tends to prevent these complications. You won't
And you're
die. The
asking about
chance.
the flu vaccination at that
Yeah,
particular one. Yeah,
we're
got it.
talking.
I
I'm
don't know.
talking about.
I'm going to ask. Offline. I'm curious to know. I will be honest. Really, in this day and age, when you talk about an adult, COVID was a vaccination that kind of like, hey, came up, and you better get vaccinated or else. My dad gets the flu vaccination, but I, you know, keep
Yeah.
saying, yeah, I probably will, but I don't, right? So I'm kind of
Right.
curious.
No.
Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. I don't know.
I think we can spend a little bit more time talking about vaccination, but I think the term mandatory upset a lot of people. This mRNA vaccine technology is relatively new, but it's safe. As a matter of fact, they're doing trials right now where they say this technology can actually decrease certain cancers, actually. So it is an absolute marvel in the infectious disease world. But to understand the general public, there's already things about vaccine hesitancy. Does it work? There's the link between autism,
Does
which
it make me
does
sick? Like
exactly.
that's a big anxiety, I think,
Yeah.
for
And it
folks.
depends on developing countries where we were using the vaccine in India, and I did a Q&A over there. I mean, the questions were, can I take a shower after the vaccine? Can I eat non-vegetarian food? I mean, it's the questions were just, my God, people were petrified of this new vaccine. So, I mean, that is something post-pandemic, we've seen significant decreases in vaccine usage because people don't want to be told anymore, hey, you need to get this vaccine, you can't go to work without this vaccine. And it's gotten a lot of bad press. But you're going to talk about measles. I mean, since the 60s, I mean, these vaccines have been unbelievably effective. We haven't had a case since 2000, and here we are with hundreds of cases.
And we're going to come back after this
Of
video and talk about the R naught factor of measles
course,
compared to flu. Okay.
absolutely.
So let's go ahead and watch this. I'm actually going to put him on a little speed.
Hi, it's Dr. Rob here with a very serious problem. We're talking about measles, and this is a 360 Explorer model. We're kind of doing a special version, a little off schedule, because right now, in many communities, the start of something very interesting and very dangerous is happening. We're beginning to have a measles outbreak for the first time in many years. Let's take a look at the 360 model and learn a little bit. I know this is a little bit of a scary kid, scary looking child, but it's here to illustrate that with measles, you develop a rash. And the rash can be on any surface of the body, the skin. Sometimes rashes are just on the trunk or just on the face. This can be anywhere. Skin rash, eye redness, sometimes called conjunctivitis, a runny nose, a cough, and a fever, sometimes a very high fever. Can also, I'm not illustrating here, but can affect the brain in something called encephalitis. It is very infective and easy to catch. It spreads through the air with respiratory droplets. Let's take a closer look at a rash in a child. This kid is a little less scary, but nonetheless, notice the rash is little small dots that get into large patches, and it's very itchy and very uncomfortable for a child. What else can it affect? As you open that child's mouth and you look in the back, there's something called Koplik spots. So as I look past the teeth in the back of the mouth, near where the tonsillar pillars are, you see these little white dots, described first by Dr. Koplik, hence Koplik spots. Often a child will have a sore throat and those are there. This is not a strep throat, it's a viral infection there. This rash can be very uncomfortable and can, again, be on any surface, and kids tend to scratch it. Here's the main reason we care about measles and infection is babies are not old enough to get the MMR virus, which protects them. But right now, they're very prone to it, those newborns. And here's a newborn with it. And if you thought you had a cranky baby before, just do not hope for a baby with a measles problem. As we look at this, let me share with you, this is a very scratchy disease. You notice this one up here is pretty normal, but these other ones have been scratched and scabbed, and then can get a secondary infection, much like strep. Let me shrink this down and get back to my other images. And then lastly, I want you to look at something really interesting. This is the membrane of the surface of the cell here, and it's a lipid bilayer. And on the outer layer, this thing, which is a measles virus, comes along, and it attaches, kind of like it has those little projectiles like many have seen in COVID. They're called F proteins and H proteins on the virus. And when you get immunized, the vaccine helps your white blood cells recognize those proteins. So your body sees them, white blood cells come along and will gobble up these viruses and hopefully do it before they land. Let's take another look. When they land, watch carefully. Inside is something called viral DNA or RNA from the DNA of somewhere, but the RNA is made, and then in the cell, more viruses are produced and are released, and thousands or millions or billions of these viruses are then in your body. When your body tries to fight them, that's where it gets inflamed and you get those spots. Here's what I want you to look at carefully. Pay close attention, please. This has something called a R012. It's a very high factor, meaning one person can infect 12 usually. And what happens with measles is over the period of about 2 weeks, you can have the virus but not know you're having the symptoms and be spreading it. And by the time you know you have measles because you have those spots, you end up having spread it to 12 people. But let's look at what happens. At week 1, day 1, there's 1 person. At week 1, there's 12. At week 2, there's 144. At week 3, each of those 144 spread to 12, and then it's 3,000. Those spread to 12, then it's 36,000. And by 10 to 20 weeks, it's 500,000 people can be infected. So that's why people get all worried when there's 15 people in Texas or North Carolina or other places where measles have been reported as of the time I'm talking to you in 2025. Very serious disease. But you know what? We're lucky to have a vaccine. Many rumors have occurred about people's vaccines. Trivial amounts of certain metals have been in some vaccines, but it's a small amount and it's not been shown to cause autism, despite certain people's opinions on that. The Surgeons General of the United States, the last 6 of them, recently had an op-ed where they talked about just this problem. So the point is let me just look you in the eye for this one if I can, and that is that measles is a dangerous, contagious disease that most kids get through. I survived it, but almost all the kids in my neighborhood got it. But one of the kids in our neighborhood died. He got pneumonia and then died of the pneumonia. Long term, there are effects that can even affect someone who's had measles years later with a subacute panencephalitis, infection of the brain, where the brain dies from a slow-grade measles infection. Very, very rare. But let's just put it this way. It's going to screw up your family's life as they quarantine you. They will probably get it if they're not immune. Support for a community have about 95 to 99% of people either who've had the disease that are immune or who get vaccinated. Because those babies, those people with immune compromise, and the kids that aren't vaccinated, they're all at risk. So Dr. Rob saying, please understand this virus, use the precaution, just like COVID, wash your hands if you're around people, especially in quarantine, wear that mask, it's sprayed through the air. All right, be a force for health. I'm glad you understand measles a little bit better with its anatomy, pathophysiology, and the diagnostic criteria as we're looking at those spots. Thanks for being a force for health.
So, for those of you that know Dr. Rob, you know that he speaks much slower than that. But I wanted to share that video in its entirety. It's about 7 minutes. And of course, you can go watch it at the Force for Health. But so I did speed it up on that deal. So if it seemed like it was a little sped up, it was. But that sets the stage really for what measles is, just to put it right in your face, people, so you can understand what it actually is, because it's been decades, right? So I had one of my interns who is from India. When I was telling her about the show and what we're doing, she had no idea that one of the states was releasing the mandatory status of measles, Florida, and now we're seeing some outbreaks in Texas. And she was just dumbfounded by why would they do that, and I was like, hey, you should ask that question during the show tomorrow. But anyways, I'm setting the stage. Comments on that video, Dr. Fernando?
Thank you, Lucy. That was a very good primer to our ongoing discussion. Of course, we're going to be talking a lot about vaccination, hesitancy, and why people are not getting vaccinated. But that was a great primer to see just to discuss the clinical syndrome. And we are going to see sadly, I'm saddened to say this, but we are going to see many more measles outbreaks in America. Um, After the pandemic, vaccination rates have significantly decreased around the world. And for a county to actually see a measles outbreak, let's talk about some numbers over here. If the community is vaccinated, the vaccination percentage is upwards of 95%. That produces what's called herd immunity, which is a community immunity. So once a town or community is over 95% vaccinated, that's when we have this phenomenon called community immunity. And it makes it extremely rare for someone to contract measles. Once it's less than 95, and once it's less than 90, your community is prone for severe outbreaks. And that's what's happening across the country. We're also seeing new outbreaks in Arizona and Utah. And also, I want to mention that exemptions are becoming much easier than what they were before, where people can just say, well, these are the reasons I don't want to get the vaccine. And you nicely pointed out, we know vaccination saves lives, but without the mandate, that becomes challenging. It opens the door for more and more people. For example, the health secretary initially was recommending vitamin A as treatment, but he eventually started recommending the vaccine, but no mandate. He made that very clear that there's no mandate. And so that opened the door for many people to say, well, do I really need it? And like you said, your intern who probably hasn't even heard of this. This is, I mean, this our last case of measles was in 2000. We haven't had cases since then. So this is a big problem, and people tend to forget that that vaccination saves lives. It's very simple because it's become so routine now, just a part of the process. You have a child, they're going for their routine vaccines, and all of a sudden parents don't even realize that these save lives. So that is the era that we're in. So it's also important to point out, just beyond people not getting vaccinated, religious and I feel exemptions are increasing. And we also see different committees giving different recommendations. The American College of Immunization Practice, the CDC, FDA sometimes give conflicting recommendations, and that is confusing for your common day-to-day American who just does not know. And all of a sudden, you're seeing these organizations sometimes giving conflicting information. Some say give the vaccine at this age, some say you can wait, and that becomes a problem. So that is important to know. But I think we're in an era post-pandemic. Vaccinations have gone down significantly, and we need to get back on track. Like your colleague, Dr. Rob, pointed out, the nice clinical syndrome. Uh, Death. We've seen 2 deaths this year from measles, and that's far too many. We shouldn't be having deaths with that, and that really, when you have a severe measles syndrome, that's what happens. These brain complications and also the death from pneumonia.
And I think that the argument that is often used is, oh, you got the vaccine, you still caught it. And I think that the message that I'd like to help amplify, you know, for us all, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't prevent it. It simply minimizes the severity of it if you were to catch it. Is that
You're absolutely right.
okay?
That is the message that is necessary. Now, for example, when we first got our COVID shots in 2020, at that time, you would say with confidence, if you got the vaccine, you wouldn't get the disease at all. But as time went by, the virus mutates as things go by. It tells you you can certainly get the disease, but my take home to the audience today is you can certainly get the disease, but your chances of being hospitalized, being placed on a breathing machine, or death are significantly reduced. So right now, if you want, we really, the most important thing is mortality benefit, or your chances of dying are significantly lowered. And like I mentioned, we have, I anticipate a very severe season based on Southern Hemisphere influenza in Australia. I'm anticipating a pretty severe season.
And interesting transition. I mean, I know we talk about measles, and some people are like, yeah, not me. I'm going to just kind of bring it full circle with a, fatality figure that Dr. Don Donahue just shared with me in chat. So I'm going to just bring it up here. So make sure that you are listening to your body and slowing down and taking care when needed. And I want to transition into the last part of our show, into you as a ultimate force for health hero. And I want to kind of bring up some cool stuff. Is that okay, Don?
It is, although I wanted to add
Sure.
two short thoughts, though. Two short thoughts, though. One is you certainly have the right. You certainly have the right as a patient, as a human, to not be vaccinated and get ill, become ill. What I would question you don't have the right is to expose the teacher, your child's teacher, who is on chemotherapy, or someone who's immunocompromised. So we owe an obligation to those around us. And earlier, Dr. Fernando talked about the kind of universal 6-foot radius, and measles is phenomenally more infectious than that. And then last but not least, in my youth, I grew up in the Jersey Shore, and one of the things we used to like to do is roam 150, 200-year-old cemeteries and just read the headstones, and they're fascinating. The way people celebrated their lives and recorded their existence on this earth. But what was really disconcerting, though, is to see how many 5-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 10-year-olds were buried in these burial grounds when there was no immunization. And when you got the measles, or you got the mumps, or you got chicken pox, you stood a large chance of not surviving. So so there is anecdotal evidence of the power that vaccine saved lives. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, no. So I think you got the message on vaccines. So going into, purpose of life and like living with a certain vision, I'm bringing up to the stage here, Dr. Fernando. Now, if I were to have it, I would be playing this video right now. But I've gotten my hand slapped before playing PBS videos on live broadcasts to certain platforms. So we will go ahead and post it at the Force for Health, and we'll go ahead and share the link in the comments of this thread. But I love, and I watch this, and I love how you fuse fashion with philanthropy. You've got your own kind of family-based initiatives with, and I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly. Is it Chirag?
Yeah, it's Chiraj. My mother's name is Chitra and my dad's name is Raj. So I just
Okay,
fused
perfect.
it together. Yeah, that's it, Chiraj. Yeah.
And then also Heal Corp. So kind of two different missions, right? So
That's correct.
let's talk a little bit about that. But before I do, on your when I watched your fashion, I love that you are creating things that people can actually purchase, and then the proceeds go towards supporting your initiatives. But the quote that I took out of there was, the concept of my designs is very simple. It's love. Love makes the world go round. And I just, that was my takeaway. I wrote it down. I just wanted to bring it up. So tell me, what inspires you to work towards these missions?
It's once again extremely generous words. Thank you for that. And being in disaster medicine and being in humanitarian medicine, there's so much need out there for help, and you realize that there are not enough funds coming in, and that's why I decided to go into designing. I've always had a penchant for fashion growing up, but I realized if I can sell these products and make some money to support these humanitarian missions that I do, I mean, I simply don't have time to fundraise. I have to be honest with you. I just like go to work, and then constantly throughout the day, we get updates from different parts of the world where, we have to take certain actions or what has to be done. So it's calls throughout the day, and so I realized I need to do this by my own. I need to work harder because all my charities are self-funded. So I got to put in more work, and I thought, selling these products will actually help humanity in numerous ways. So that's why I moved to fashion. And I'm extremely blessed. I didn't expect the community to embrace me so much. It's been an amazing experience. I've only been around for a year, but numerous people have really they've liked the story, and people have embraced me. I'm extremely fortunate. But I want to continue doing this. It's not. I do not want any money out of this at all. It just goes back to helping people. And fashion is a beautiful medium. To fashion is love, and people love fashion all over the world. So my plan is to kind of over the next few months to really talk about how fashion can help humanity. The event that we had at the Eiffel Tower recently is was called Fashion for Hope, which was involving the Miss Universe team. They had followed some of my work. So none of this. You see some nice fancy pictures out there, but I'm very shy. I can assure you. But all of these will help my cause, and photos like this. I'm able to get a wider reach, and with that, I'm hoping to start new missions. I was just in Ethiopia, a certain part of Ethiopia during the war. It's called the Tigray region. More than 120,000 women were subjected to gender-based violence. And so I went down there and said, let's see what we can do. This particularly is a very important time with USAID. Some of the humanitarian efforts have just cut funds cold turkey, leaving these extremely vulnerable countries, with nothing. And now, to be quite honest with you, the cost what I'm looking at to start a mental health clinic is probably about $3,000 a month. And with that $3,000 a month, my goodness, you can see so many patients, hire psychologists, hire a good office in the heart of the city for $3,000. And so I'm by no means a millionaire, but I asked myself, can I figure out how to make $3,000 to support this cause? And the answer is yes. Yes, I can do that. It means I have to take up a couple of extra shifts, which is fine, but the gain for this community is unbelievable. Like it's sad to see the way USAID cuts have just started overnight. They weren't withdrawn over a period of time. It said no more money, done, and jobs were left, communities are left even more vulnerable. So to make a difference in these kind of situations is extremely humbling, and I'm glad I can do it.
I am mind boggled that you can go right now on October 21st, 2025, to another part of the earth or world and see the conditions that still exist. I think it's so easy to live in our little shelter and complain about the little things, right? And so praise and appreciate folks like yourselves that are bringing light to it. And quite frankly, I've got a soft spot in my heart for anything that is affecting women. One of our empowerment clubs is actually called My Girl Power, where you have to know your voice, own your health, flex your wings and leave your mark. And, part of the whole Force for Health culture is really helping folks find a purpose, because that really is part of living life, and being able to thrive. So thank you. I wish we had more time to talk about that, but we appreciate the mission. Let's go ahead and kind of go around the room. And when I say ready and resilient now, what does that mean to you? And what's your key takeaway or key message for families going into tis the season the next couple months? I'll start with you.
Yeah, you mentioned a very important term, resilience, which is what we talk about in disaster medicine. And my mentor, Dr. Donahue, he instills this in all the fellows about community resilience. And we do know what we need to do to keep ourselves safe this season. Sad to mention this repeatedly, but vaccines are the best way, like you pointed out, to keep yourself safe and keep others safe, which is very important. We need to be cognizant of other people, our surrounding relatives with compromised immune systems. We may be able to fight it off, but we should be, considerate for other people. And that's one of the things, Japan is a very special country to me. I remember I traveled there numerously, many times. And in winter, before COVID or before flu, everyone in a bus would be wearing a mask. And that just resonated with me to think how important the community is. When one person is ill, forget about COVID or influenza. At that time, it was not a respiratory virus syndrome, but in the summer, if someone is coughing, they have that basic respect for other people. And I thought about that a lot in Japan. So we should not only keep ourselves safe, but we should think about other people as well.
I love that. And I'm just going to just a little piggyback on that. If you see somebody wearing a mask, it's none of your freaking business. Keep walking on and don't make a judgment about it. They are obviously wearing a mask for some reason, right? I'm glad you mentioned that. Dr. Donahue, my trusted partner and co-host here, final words of wisdom and key takeaways for
My
our
first,
families.
my first word of wisdom is that's a tough act to follow, but I think to remember that remember community. We owe it to ourselves. We have our rights and our privileges, but we owe it to other people around us too. As Rajeev was talking, I was thinking, for no reason, I was thinking of the pioneer spirit of the United States and of communities, different communities that come together when there's a tragedy, come together when there's a disaster, and come together before, the volunteer fire department, the volunteer first aid. I think we should focus more on what brings us together and makes us alike than the things that separate us. So that's part of resilience is being there for each other.
Yeah, and why I really have this together as part of the tag. I think I may have said it 3 times in the opening statement, right? But together, together, together is really what we are trying to do. So remember, we're a community. And I think that, my takeaway is really for the mamas. I mean, mamas are usually the CEOs of the family. They are the ones that are overworked and really the ones that are putting their health kind of behind everybody else. And it's wash your hands, get your family vaccinated so that you can reduce what you have to deal with, right? We all know if somebody is sick in the family, it's usually the mom that has to kind of carry on. And Lord help us if the mom gets sick, right? So I'm just going to kind of wear my pro mama's hat and say, moms, we know you're leaning into a very busy season. Do yourself a favor. If you can, go ahead and vaccinate, get your family vaccinated. That will just reduce potential issues coming up. And listen to yourselves, know your body, and slow down when you need to. Okay, so that is it. Dr. Fernando, it is wonderful to meet you. I look forward to more conversations with you. And Dr. Donahue, Don, I call you Don. It's great. Thank you so much for leading the conversation and for inviting our guests in here. Until next time, we are the 3rd Thursdays of the month. So we will see you December. And until then.
Tuesday.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's right. The 3rd Tuesday of the month, 1 o'clock Pacific time, 4 o'clock Eastern. And you can go to forceforhealth.com. You can get registered for free and have access to some of these tools. Remember to be a force for health. And until next time, be ready and resilient now together. Okay? Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of Ready and Resilient Now Together. Remember, you can go to the www.theforceforhealth.com and get started for free for access to resources and tools. Or you can go to your app store, keyword search 360 Force for Health Academy, and download the app and get started for free as well. So until next time, be ready and resilient now together. Take care.